Hello everybody, my name is Mario5514 and welcome back to another Splatoon Talk video. In this video we're going to be looking back at some of the previous updates in Splatoon 3's history as of version 11.1. With the next update being confirmed, we're going to be looking back to see how much the game has changed over the past 4 years since 2022. If you end up enjoying the video, hit the like button, and if you end up liking the video, consider subscribing, and let's get started as we open up Drizzle Season 2024 with version 9.0, which dropped on August 30th, 2024. And remember the last update where the devs noted that they plan on releasing the next update at the end of the current season, which made changes to multiplayer, including lowering the abilities of select weapons? Yeah, that's what they're doing in this update. So let's just see what they've done in this update. And oh my gosh, there's a lot to talk about here. From all these notes, yeah, there's a whole lot we gotta talk about. This update focuses on adding data for a special big run that will be held in the near future, improving connectivity and making adjustments to battles. In regards to connectivity, we have reduced the time it takes to convey the things that happen in game to the other players by optimizing the game's internal processing and adjusting the communication control processing. Yeah, we'll talk about what they did here in a bit. For multiplayer balance, we have made the changes that we previously notified you about to lower the performance of some select weapons. Yeah, here's what they did, or here's the weapons listed. The Squeezer and Foil Squeezer were intended as weapons that are difficult to master but can produce high performance when mastered. However, because their shots could reach from a long distance and because they had high movement speed while firing, it was easy to make a lot of attempts, which made it easier to make up for the control difficulty. For that reason, their performance has been reduced. Yeah, you're going to see what they did to Squeezer. For the Range Blaster and the Custom Range Blaster, by reducing the area of the attack and inking due to the explosion, we maintain the property of dealing damage to opponents you aim for carefully while reducing the property that deals damage to opponents whose positions are not precisely known. Yeah, another thing to talk about here. Our intention with both weapons is to make it so that players who specialize in other weapons are not forced to switch to these weapons, while also maintaining a level of performance sufficient enough for players who already specialize in these weapons to continue to fight using them. Yeah, this is basically like power control what they're doing. For the Sniper Rider 5H and the Sniper Rider 5B, we slightly reduced their ability to maintain inking status from a distance. Yeah, you're going to see what they did to Pencil. With the Slosher, Slosher Deco, and Order Slosher Replica, we have adjusted performance and points required for specials to make them likely like many other Sloshers in that they have high instantaneous fighting and inking power, but when fighting with them continuously over time, it is easy to run out of ink. Yeah, you're going to see what they did to this weapon. It's kind of funny. Regarding the Heavy Edit Splatling and the Heavy Edit Splatling Nouveau, we changed the aspect of them where, in comparison to other Splatlings, were shorter flying distances. They were very effective at maintaining ink coverage when exchanging fire across areas such as splat zones. More on that in a bit. For the Wellstring and Custom Wellstring, we made changes to slightly lower performance when maintaining inking status from a distance. Yeah, another funny change I want to talk to you guys about. With the Trizuka, we made changes to increase the opening when used on an opponent at close range and also slightly increase the time to find a safe place to take cover after hearing an opponent's Trizuka's activation noise. Yeah, you're going to see what they did with this special. Additionally, we have changed it so that Japan and regions nearby it cannot participate in the Tenatech division for X battles. Of the total number of players in Japan and nearby regions, an extremely small percent select Tenatech division, the division for the Americas and Europe, despite living in Japan or nearby regions. However, we have made this change because it has reached a percentage that has a negative effect on rankings among players participating in the Tenatech division. Yeah, we're going to be talking about what they did here because it's very interesting. And the next update will focus on adding data for the Grand Festival. Nintendo. Alright, with that being said, that right there, the next update will focus on adding data for the Grand Festival. That, like we see at the end of 5.1, this was to prevent data miners. So, yeah, with all that being confirmed, let's just jump in to see what they did. Alright. Added feature, changes to Amiibo. Added support for the following Amiibo. Callie and Marie from Alterna, as well as Pearl and Marina from Side Order. And here's the connectivity change. Improved connectivity programming to shorten the time between sent data being received by recipients and the response that it is then returned. For general connectivity during multiplayer, an average reduction of approximately 0.4/60ths of a second is expected. The amount of reduction will vary depending on the amount of information being sent back and forth via connectivity and on the processing load. In situations such as dealing damage or to defeating opponents, an average reduction of approximately 3.4/60ths of a second, or about 3 frames, is expected. So this is an overall good change here. This is something that people have kind of been complaining about or been kind of dealing with for 2 years, and it's about time that we actually got a netcode change to the game, which is actually substantial. And we're now jumping into the patch notes, so let's see what the devs give us. Squeezer. Slow the speed of the first shot fired after pressing the ZR button by approximately 5% and shorten its flight distance. So basically, remember how I told you guys in the previous videos where Squeezer was very powerful and very oppressive? Yeah, this was the update where Squeezer basically dropped. So basically, the shot velocity and burst fire mode will be 5% slower. However, its range in burst fire mode is also 5% shorter. So yeah, it has 5% slower shot speed, and it was also given a 5% range nerf, or a 5% range decrease. So yeah, Squeezer will not be able to attack from a longer distance like it did in Splatoon 2, as well as prior to this update. On top of that, slow movement speed while firing by approximately 8%. A lot of people were confused about this because they thought this was both for its burst fire mode and its painting mode. This nerf was only to its burst fire mode. After the update, people did a bit of a test, and its burst fire mode was 8%. Its strafe speed in burst fire mode was 8% slower, but its strafe speed in painting mode still matched that of Splattershot, which, yeah, its burst fire mode's strafe speed was matching that of Splattershot. Now it was 8% slower. This toned back Squeezer to where it required more skill to use. I mean, it was still a decent weapon, but after these changes, Squeezer's top tier status was gone. And yeah, Squeezer was no longer the oppressive weapon like it was before. And other midlines such as Slosher, Range Blaster, 96 Gal, and H3, along with Edit, could have a slightly better chance to have better matchups against it, since Squeezer had much stronger matchups against them. Now its matchups are going to be a little weaker against those options. Range Blaster. Decrease the radius of the damaging explosion by approximately 6%. If this looks familiar, this is the blast radius nerf that both Blaster and the Rapid Blasters got in Splatoon 2. So, Range Blaster's blast radius was originally 3.5 units. This basically got toned back to 3.3 units. And remember that paint buff that it was given back in 6.0 where its blast radius paint 15% better? Yeah, they actually nerfed it. Decrease the radius of the ink splatter at the point of impact with a floor or wall, or when detonated midair, by approximately 9%. So the 15% buff was reverted by 9%, but the other 6% is still there, but it's hardly going to be noticeable. These changes right here hurt Range Blaster substantially, given that Range Blaster was one of the best weapons to use in solo queue or X battles, and CRB proved to be a very powerful menace in tower control, so this was basically toning them back a bit. But somehow the weapons came out in one piece. And after the update, Range Blaster did exceptionally well, specifically CRB, as in particular, did very well in the King's Cup, which was a Nintendo tournament in Japan, which after this update dropped, CRB ended up doing well in the King's Cup. But Range Blaster and CRB would eventually drop off. This, plus paired with the Kraken nerf from the previous update, really hurt CRB by a substantial amount. Almost felt like it was overkill, but CRB, along with regular Range Blaster, or VRB as it's called, came out in one piece. Pencil. Slightly decreased the width of spray droplets created by shots. This was the first ever nerf that Pencil has been given. Even though the first nerf was a points for special nerf, this was the first main weapon nerf Pencil has been given. So the width of the spray droplets created was originally 2.22 units. This was now reduced down to 2.11 units. Though Pencil is still considered a dominant cooler weapon, this was when the devs started to slowly chip away at Pencil. 7.2 is when they first started to do it, and 9.0 is basically trying to speed it up. So that's what they were doing here in this update for Pencil. Slosher. Increase the amount of ink consumed by approximately 9%. Yeah, Slosher got the least harshest nerf in this update, which is kind of funny, as well as kind of odd here. So originally its ink consumption was 7%, meaning you got 14 sloshes. This was increased to 7.6%, meaning you get only 13 sloshes instead of 14. So you'd have to run a little bit of Ink Saver main, but the weapon came out in one piece. It's still one of the best weapons in the game, but it just makes it a little bit more gear dependent, and it has a little less it has a little more downtime, which it's still a decent nerf, though I do think I could have thought they could have done a bit more to Slosher, but I don't know how that would have gone over. I don't know. Heavy edit Splatling. Slightly decreased the number of spray droplets created by shots. So originally, you know that paint buff that it was given back in 6.0? Yeah, they decided to slightly tone it back. So originally its droplet rate was buffed to 0.75. This was reduced down to 0.6. The distance between the droplets was originally 22 units. This was extended a bit to about 24 units. And the frequency of inking occurring at the player's feet is unchanged, which is, I think, something good here. We don't want to be doing too much, but at the same time, we want to tone it back to where it's actually incentivized to fight more. So both of these paint nerfs to both edit and pencil are going to slowly match their cooler output as what we see with NZAP 85. So that's what they're going to be doing here, which I think is a really good change. Wellstring. Decrease the radius of the ink splatter that occurs upon impact by approximately 8%. So yeah, this weapon wasn't even out for like 2 updates, and it already got its first nerf, which was a paint nerf. So basically where you see the bolts hit the ground, where you see the paint at, yeah, the paint radius of those bolts where they land, that's now 8% smaller, which is just kind of hilarious. Not sure if this was necessary, but definitely a random nerf done to it. But it's kind of funny that they gave it to that, even though Wellstring does have a bit of a niche in Rainmaker, so I guess that kind of makes sense there. And here's the buff that was a bug fix. Dreadringer. Fix an issue where when a player used the Dreadringer or Dreadringer D while jumping, the flight distance of the ink was slightly shorter than intended. The range was increased by increasing the initial velocity from 1.7 units to 1.79 units a frame. So that was basically the only buff / bug fix in this update. Or it was a bug fix that became a buff. And yeah, to Dreadringer. So we have no sub-weapons. Specials. Trizooka. Increase the amount of time between activation and becoming able to fire by approximately 1/12 of a second. That's our nerf. So remember how I told you guys Trizooka's startup was dumb, being 15 frames? Yeah, they only extended it by 5 frames. So its startup was originally 15 frames. This basically increased it to 20 frames, which is, I think, a good change. And out of the nerfs that were given to it in 5.1 and 8.1, 9.0 gave Trizooka the only relevant nerf. That's it. The other 2 were just random and unnecessary. I mean, it wasn't that big. They could have done a bit more. If they did at least 10 frames, this would have been better. But still, with the 5-frame startup nerf, it tones back in one of the most annoying attributes about dealing with Trizooka. But it's still considered a top tier. It's just a little bit more reactable, that's all. But still, they could have done a bit more. But keep in mind, they're not done with Zuka yet. Keep that in mind. And points for special change is pretty brief. Only 2 of them. CRB will get Kraken at 210, and Slosher will get Tri-Strike at 210. For Slosher, it's kind of an okay change. It got Tri-Strike a bit too much, so I guess that's the reason why. So that's a nice change there. But for CRB, we really had to nerf the weapon after we gave it after its blast radius paints less, its blast radius is smaller, and after Kraken got its nerf in the previous update. Yeah, this was straight up overkill. At this point, CRB would just drop off. At this point, it would just hardly be used. And 8 out of 10 times, you're going to be using the regular model over CRB. And yeah, that was it. The next battles made it less likely for players to be matched again with players they just encountered in the previous X battles. I guess that's to reduce it to where you're able to just get free wins off of the players that helped you win. So I guess that's to reduce that. Made it so that Japan and regions near it cannot select Tenatech Division when selecting an X Battles division. Yeah, originally players in Japan would just go on a Tenatech Division and just go on to earn free badges. Yeah, unfortunately they can't join Tenatech Division anymore. Yeah, it was kind of dumb there, and at least they kind of fixed it. So that was a huge issue that they finally ironed out, from what I've heard. We have changes to Splatfests here. Made it possible for players who achieve a Splatfest title of ruler or higher to board the Splatfest flow and take pictures with the allies they last won a Splatfest battle in open or pro with. So basically, if you got your first win as a ruler, or if you win a 10x, 100x, or a 333x battle, you're now able to, basically take a photo upon a float. Made it so that players can choose additional poses from atop the Splatfest float after achieving a Splatfest title of Ruler +1 or higher, which I think is nice. Made it so that a selected deep cut pose atop the Splatfest flow. Made it possible for players who have downloaded the expansion pass to select Squid Sisters and Off the Hook poses atop the Splatfest float, which is actually pretty cool. Yeah. Changed to Salmon Run. Added data for a special Big Run. Added an item that can be exchanged for fish scales. Made it so that you could capsules containing fish scales from the reward meter. The gear you can get from the reward meter will now change each shift rather than each month, which I think is kind of nice there. It's a nice quality of life change. Also, a little bit of information on the special Big Run. This was a big run that took place before the Grand Festival. Any of you who remember that, that's basically what they're talking about for 9.0. And we'll possibly talk about that in the next video, or we'll talk about that in the next update. So yeah, that's what they're teasing you about. Other changes: reduce the XP required for a weapon's freshness to reach 1 star from 10,000 to 5,000 to make it easier to get Sheldon licenses. The total XP required to reach 2 star or higher will not change. Weapons that had 5,000 XP or more, less than 10,000 XP before applying the update data will reach 1 star after applying the update data using that weapon once in a battle. Change the design of some splash tag banner designs. This right here, what you see right here, this was basically teasing about third kits, in which, people were on copium for third kits, and you also have to remember, we were slowly approaching the end of the update cycle, like the normal update cycle, so people were really hoping that Nintendo would drop the updates before, the update cycle would come to an end, or come to a close. But more on that in the later video, in the next update, or later. We also have some bug fixes to player controls. We also have fixes to multiplayer, which, holy crap, there's a whole lot of him here. We have fixes to Salmon Run. Fixed an issue where when Umbrella's canopy is damaged, the canopy would be unlinked or uninked on other players' screens. I wonder why. Don't know why there, but okay. Fixes to Splatfest. Fixed an issue where sometimes when players landed a fizz bang on the ground inside a big bubbler, the fizz bang would not launch properly. Wonder why. And then we have other fixes shown here. And then we have some unlisted changes here. And that's it. That is 9.0. In conclusion, unlike 7.0, which was regarded as the worst update in the game, 9.0 was regarded as the most infamous update in Splatoon 3. So, yeah. With the Grand Festival around the corner, we're going to be seeing how much that people would be playing this game after the update cycle closes, or it comes to an end, which we'll talk about in the next video, or in the next update. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time.